Welcome again to my series on leadership for everyone, everywhere. I am Emeritus Professor Stephen Adei, and I'm glad to be coming to you again. Let me remind you that what I'm saying now, you can follow me every Saturday morning at 8:30 on ZFM 101.9. And, of course, Professor Emeritus Stephen Adei YouTube channel. The last session, I majored on the functions of political leadership. And I concluded by quoting Miles Monroe, that whenever a nation has lack of quality, legitimate and just leaders, national deterioration occurs. Quality leadership is key to a prosperous and peaceful life and nation. It is obvious that our nations are painfully in need of such leaders. God's answer to all our social, moral, and economic problems is qualified and righteous leaders. We'll be talking about the qualified and righteous leadership. Unquote, Miles Monroe's view is that of mine. Leadership is cause. Everything else is effect, especially when it comes to the national level. Therefore, today, I want to still emphasize and bring it more succinctly the importance of political leadership in nation building. Let me repeat, the importance of political leadership in nation building. Let me take a historic view, and one of the groups of people, and they are not the only one, who have had a continuous history of millennia, of heads of states, kings, was Israel. And when you go to the Bible and you read Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, the Chronicles, you almost ask, where were the people? It is a litany of one king after the other, and the fortunes of the nation rose and fell with the type of king that they had. Be it at the zenith with David and Solomon, or at the bottom during the last days of the sons of Josiah, when the northern kingdom had gone into exile. History is almost about political leaders, and time will not allow me to go through the great empires from Babylon through the Romans, the Greeks, the British empires, and the rest. But coming nearer home, do you know that when any country that has developed in recent past is associated with a leader? Mention Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. Mentioned Malaysia, Mahathir Mohamad. Mentioned South Korea, President Park. Go to Japan, a little over a century and 20 years ago, was the Meiji Emperor at that time. And I can go on and on and on. The type of leadership almost defines the fortune of their people. In Africa, there are little giants like Botswana, Mauritius, Rwanda, and you can trace them either to a leader or a political regime. In the case of Mauritius and Botswana, succession with the same type of development agenda. The African problem, which will be my next session, is a leadership problem. As I share the 7 functions of political leaders, let me reiterate it in a different form from my book, The Leadership and Nation Building, that political leaders shape first and foremost the political trajectory, how the country is able to have a stable system to govern themselves. Whether it's democratic or non-democratic, this is not the issue. I've just returned from Dubai, and it's a monarchy with sheikhs, but they have a consistent vision and agenda, and they have made a desert almost a heaven on earth. It is a leadership issue. And sometimes people talk about, I'm not going to spend much of my time on whether it's democratic or benevolent dictator, that will be for another day. But under any kind of regime, leadership determines the fortunes of the people. And the first is that they shape how the people feel, whether they are being governed justly or not. For example, what Ghana, and I will leave Ghana particularly to the last, but let me mention that I don't think that the average Ghanaian is so particular about whether it's NDC or NPP in power. They are concerned about the policies they put together and the impact on them. And when we talk about, breaking the 8 or having it on whatever it is, why have Ghanaians almost every 8 years change their leadership? Because they get dissatisfied and they don't see any trajectory for their future. And therefore, as a nation, we haven't come to a point whereby we are comfortable with the type of political infrastructure which we have. The second, and Ghanaians are quite clear about that, the political leadership shaped the economic fortunes of the nation. We've just gone through 2 regimes, and a little over 9 years ago, not an equal landslide, I don't think the Ghanaians will be willing to live with any regime or any party which consistently improves their economic fortunes. The government as an institution controls about a quarter of the GDP in terms of expenditure. They take it from us, but they control it. Again, their policies shape the private sector in their performance and the responses of every individual through their fiscal policy, that's how they spend the budget, their monetary policy, the interest rate, control of credit, and the rest. Gargantuan power through policy. The government is the biggest consumer in almost any country, whether it is capitalist or socialist. Therefore, the economic fortunes of a country is shaped by its political leaders. Once again, it's very important that social cohesion, social capital of any country depends upon how the political leaders conduct their affairs and bring everybody on board. The worst thing that can happen to any country is when divisions along political lines, along tribal lines, racial lines, leads to, say, civil war, because you destroy yourself from within. Sad to say, many countries have had to, even in the initial years over slavery, there was the American Civil War. Therefore, the social cohesiveness of a country is more or less determined by who holds political power. But most importantly, and oftentimes it's not talked about, it's assumed, is that political leaders shape the culture of people. By that, I'm not talking about some derbeds and people shaking their bottom, dancing agbeja or adwa or something. Yes, that is the relics of our tradition. I'm talking about how people think, their character, their vision, their conduct, their values. For example, in this country, we have a culture which is almost disastrous, that it doesn't matter how you get rich. And I have been shocked, left and right, how overnight people who are entrusted with the wealth of this nation as political leaders just feed themselves. Now, I'll give two examples to show, without mentioning names, from two different regimes. When the NPP came to power, almost 10 years ago, I traveled with one of my friends who, of course, as usual, in their wilderness, was having very little to show. You can see it from their car. We traveled from Kumasi to Accra Airport on the domestic flight. We came out and there was a brand new V8. Incredible. To be honest, I didn't make a comment, but I knew that the future is not going to be good. When the NDC came to power, despite everything else, and there's many things they are doing, I'm just using these two not for balance purposes, but to illustrate what I'm referring to. There was somebody who had practically nothing, not even a car. The next time I went to his house where I thought the person is, because somebody had asked me to deliver a parcel from London to being a mutual family and friend. There was nobody in that house. So I won't tell where the house is. So I called the person. I wanted to deliver this to your house. Oh, I live in shadow. What? From grace to grass in matter of months when the NDC comes to power. Let me tell you, as a result, and I'm talking about the culture, we have Galamsey, which is being actually fueled by politicians and some of our traditional leaders, and of course, with the connivance of the security agents, or they are being empowered. Because I was going to Takwa the other day, and I saw near Wasekropon, actually at the police barrier, the type of devastation going on by the roadside, not that you have to go. And I asked the policeman, what's happening? He told me, sir, what can we do? When a policeman is faced with gargantuan destruction and illegality and says, what can I do? So we are building a culture in terms of norms, values, and behaviors which are anti-development. And at whose feet do we lay the blame? Politicians. That's why negatively, for me, I cannot overemphasize the importance of political leadership. And to quote again Miles Monroe, whenever a nation has lack of quality, legitimate, and just leaders, national deterioration occurs. Quality leadership is a key to a prosperous and peaceful life and nation. On the more positive side, functional leaders, ethical leaders, and we'll be talking about why African is so much shortchanged when it comes to political leadership, makes a lot of difference. I just chaired two funds, mutual funds, on the market in Ghana, annual general meeting. And even though I am a chairman for many years, therefore I've seen the trend. the day and night difference between 2024 and 2025 was like day and night. In fact, 2023, one of the funds I chaired the board had a negative 0.5% return. The following year, we edged up a little. Last year, we were, and that's where we had the AGM today, proud to return not less than 50% to our shareholders. Yes, I have to congratulate my staff for what they did, but largely it is politically determined by the policies of the 2 years with the change in exchange rate, inflation, and the rest. Positively, it will make a difference. Again, it's not so much what the government does, but what it catalyzes the private sector to do. And when these indicators are stable and favorable, the private sector rise up. I therefore want to say and conclude by saying that it is everybody's business to make sure that we have the right political leaders and that they do what is expected from them. But why is it that we have not been having such leaders? That will be my next episode. Why has Africa had so much leadership challenge? Shalom, and I will be with you next week when I take on this specific one. Pourquoi, on dit français, the French will say, Adei, enna, Africa, yebrese, if we say, and you won't want to make penyasan. Atiasifuo, edikamfuo, edienshamo. It is something of concern. Why? And we must tackle that and bail the cat, or we have no future. Shalom and the Lord be with you. This is Emeritus Professor Stephen Adei on leadership for everyone, everywhere, and I am on political leadership. You can always listen to me on ZFM 101.9 or visit my YouTube. You are most welcome, not only in the when it is posted, but at any time you are invited. I thank you.